Renewable. As I said, there's one or two places here which look vaguely familiar. It's nice to see you again. I think the one or two people I haven't met yet. What's your name? Hi. What's your name? There is. Hi. Nice to meet you. So I'm gonna speak briefly about the renewable energy philosophy of Arnold Goldman. Who was Arnold Goldman? Arnold Goldman has a good claim to be called the father of the global solar energy industry. He came here from California in 1980, and he founded a company called Luz, which became by far the most successful solar energy company on the planet. It built the first ever large-scale solar fields in California, 350 megawatts. And by 1990, Luz plants were creating 90% of all solar energy which was generated on the planet. Luz company then collapsed, long story. Arnold went and did other things. And then in 2004, he refounded Luz, called it Luz 2. And the company subsequently became BrightSource, which still exists and has built a bunch of other very large projects in California and in Israel, Ashalim, and is now, I believe, working in China. So that would be enough, pretty good life's work for most people. Arnold wasn't like most people. He was also a profound thinker. He absorbed modern physics and quantum theory and Gödel's impossibility proof, and widely read in economics and environmental studies. And his solar energy practical work emerged out of a whole profound and intricate philosophy. I only worked with him for a couple of years, and mostly we were trying to design eco-cities. But every now and again, in the coffee breaks, he'd tell me about his sort of broader philosophy of things. And most of it, to be quite frank, I couldn't understand, because he was a very bright guy, and his thoughts ran faster than his words. And he found it very difficult, frankly, to express himself coherently. He did, however, write 2 books, which were this is one of them. This was his first one, came out in 1980. It's called A Working Paper on Project Luz. And there's about a third, a quarter of it, which is compelling, powerful, and clear. And the rest of it is completely incomprehensible. I really can make very much of it. But the fact that so much of it is compelling and clear, makes you think that there is probably something to the other stuff, even if I couldn't make any sense of it. And then he wrote a second book in 2000, which I could understand even less of. But the same caveat applies. The fact that what you could understand seems to be profound and make a lot of sense may suggest that maybe the rest of it does as well. So what I'm going to talk about is how, for Arnold, renewable energy was a Jewish spiritual value. Now, we're working in renewable energy here. You're working in renewable energy. I still do for a few hours a month. And we're doing it, I think I can speak for most, if not all of us, not just out of us because it's a business, but out of a sense that there are values which we believe in, which are also expressed by working in solar. And the way that we normally articulate that is that fossil fuels do serious environmental damage, particularly through the way they cause climate change. Climate change is extremely threatening. It's already causing exacerbated storms and droughts, and we've had one of the driest winters so far for many, many years. And the consequences are only set to get worse as this phenomenon develops if we don't do something radical to reverse it. Now, this last hurricane season in the United States was the most destructive, I believe, on record. 3 major destructive hurricanes. And the one in Puerto Rico took down the entire electricity grid in Puerto Rico, which is a province of a western country. The official death toll is 64. Right? It's probably over 1,000. Why? How do we know this? Because in the months following the hurricane, the people died about twice as much as they tended to die in the same period last year. Right? So although they weren't all they weren't having trees fall on their heads, right, or having their houses blown down on top of them, right? Many of them were dialysis patients whose dialysis machines stopped working, or they had heart attacks and there was no way to get to the hospital because they didn't have a cell phone. So in a Western country, a hurricane killed well over 1,000 people, and just about everybody agrees that this is becoming worse because of climate change. Climate change should be enough to get us to move on renewable energy, but apparently it's not. And so one reason I thought it'd be interesting to introduce these other spiritual perspectives, which Arnold develops on climate change, is because maybe there are elements of them which could resonate with people religiously and spiritually and stir people and communities and nations to move on renewable energy in a way which they haven't yet. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if articulating these perspectives will have such effects, but I think it's worth a try. So that's why I decided to speak about this. So Arnold's thinking about solar stems from a vision of the universe as one unified, organic, living entity with a creator behind it. Perspective based on the Torah, based on the book of Bereshit. He writes in this book, if the universe has a consciousness, surely that consciousness must have the temperament of an artist. Human beings, residents of the universe, are capable of appreciating its beauty and molding the elements in the environment to suit their will. Such is the universe in which we live. It is dynamic and in the process of completing its creation. We are an active agent in the achievement of this process. So he sees that our role in the creation as being understanding the organic unity of creation, appreciating it, and finding ways to continue to unfold the development of creation through our ingenuity and through, crucially, the use of technology. But he goes on to say, it's difficult, however, to see our role as continuers and partners in the work of creation. Why? The difficulty stems not from the subtlety of the relationship between our acts and the creative processes of the universe, but rather from the strange way we have of isolating our handiwork from its overall organic context. We, for the most part, see the products of our labor as separate inanimate objects divorced from their production process. We fail to see the automobile or telephone as an integral part of an organic system. He's saying something really interesting and profound there. We use our ability to create and to continue and partner in the work of creation through technology to obscure our role as partners and continuers of the work of creation. He brings the example, as many of you I'm sure will never have seen one, but of a digital watch. This was a popular piece of technology in the 1970s and 80s, right? And he said that this is a misuse of technology because on the screen you've got these numbers, right? And it cuts you off an awareness from the cyclical sweep of time and creation, right? Just imagine if your watch face, right, had a digital representation of the sun sweeping through the sky, right? And then little numbers on that screen, which you could relate that to the process of the passage of time, right? That would connect you to creation and to the evolution of the world, rather than cut you off from it, which is what you have when you just see those 4 numbers on the screen. What Arnold does in this book is, first of all, develop this perspective, and then set out a blueprint for a utopian, but really quite practical seeming community and city based on this these ideas. He envisaged in a granular level of detail a community called Luz, which would be based about 20 minutes outside of Jerusalem, just to the northwest of it, in which people would, through the way they lived, through their homes, through the industries, the communities, the education system, become aware of their role in the unfolding of creation and the way in which technology in their lives were an expression of the creative force and genius of creation, rather than a way of cutting us off from our awareness of our connection to creation. So he goes into tremendous detail about what the education system would look like, and what people's houses would look like, and what some of the home appliances would look like to connect us to nature rather than to separate us from nature. But the bit which is actually became practical was that he envisioned that all of the houses would be powered by solar, and the main industry of city and community Luz would be solar energy. So he talks about a company called International Solar Equipment Corp, brackets ISE Corp, which this was, I think he wrote this in 1979. Yeah, pretty far ahead of his time.
That's we're not alive
yet. Yeah. And proposes that solar energy should be the industry, the central industry of this place, because solar has the ability to connect us to an awareness of the source of our energy like nothing else, right? So he writes here, from an ethical point of view, the ISE products provide a piece of equipment which allows the user to better understand and control his life with regard to his energy needs. The machinery is designed so that one can see in a single glance the causal connection between incident sunlight and the energy being produced for his use. He's able to develop an intuitive relationship as to the amount of incident sunlight you must collect to run various appliances. Contrast this situation with the situation resulting from energy derived from fossil fuels. The myriad of political entities, drilling and mining companies, distribution companies, and volumes of rules and regulations governing the production of fossil fuels makes it impossible for its recipient to comprehend the causal process, much less exercise any control over its situation, or be in any way aware of the source of the energy which is powering your daily life. So he's sort of describing a process where you have, say you have solar panels on your roof or solar panels on a field, and you can see the sun coming down, hitting those panels, being instantaneously transmitted or translated into solar energy, and that powering the appliances, the light switches which you flick, everything in your house, and you understand the connection between the sun, this infinite source of energy, and the way in which you use those forms of energy in your daily life. Contrasting that with fossil fuels, where it's dug out from under the ground, and you have these mining companies which do the digging out, and then you have these production plants which, well, first of all, it's trekked hundreds of miles across the country to a production plant where it's burned, and then it's translated into electricity through the burning and the transfer and the moving of a turbine, and then it's transmitted hundreds more miles across the country to a place where it can be used. And we could hardly design a system of producing energy which was better fitted to obscuring our connection between the use of our energy and the infinite source of divine blessing which provides the energy that we use. So he's describing there an ethical and spiritual dimension of how we use our energy, which is not, I think, one which which many people think about. As I said before, we think about climate change was absolutely urgent and absolutely compelling, but still does not seem to have been compelling enough. So maybe there are aspects of these alternative perspectives which can, as I said, resonate in a way to stir and inspire people to adopt solar for a wider range of motivational bases, if you like. So what is the awareness that solar connects us to? Well, the way Arnold described it, it's an awareness of an infinite source of energy, which is continuously pouring down on the earth thousands of times more energy than we can actually use. Arnold was very much inspired by and informed by Kabbalah. He was quite a serious student of Kabbalistic thought. One thing I discovered recently was that there was a position, a resident Kabbalist on the staff of Luz during the 1980s. It was actually there was actually serious competition for the job. And there are various people who we probably, many of us know, who applied for the job and didn't get it, right? For example, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, the founder of the Jewish Renewable movement, Zichrono Livracha, he told me a few years before he died that he actually interviewed for the job of resident Kabbalist at Luz. Didn't get it, but he was prepared to get up and move from Boulder, Colorado to Jerusalem to take that job if he had got it. The person who actually got it was Rabbi Yedidya Ginsburg, who is today still a very well-known popular teacher of Kabbalah and Jewish thought. He's moved considerably to the right in recent years, and Arnold actually broke with him in the 1980s, but not before learning a great deal of Kabbalah from Rabbi Ginsburg. So Arnold's perspective was that solar is a kind of a physical image for the Kabbalistic vision of the universe. In the Kabbalistic vision of the universe, we have this infinite source of divine goodness called Ein Sof, which somehow, and I don't really understand what these words means, somehow emits infinite divine goodness into the world. And the Kabbalistic myth of creation was that in this, at the dawn of creation, this infinite flow of Ein Sof goodness came into the world. The kalim, the vessels of creation, whatever exactly that means, were not strong enough to receive this infinite light. The vessels shattered, and that's the world that we live in. We live in a world where with infinite light, only the light is scattered and trapped by kalim, by klipot as they're called, so shells in which this infinite light is trapped and encased. So you and me and this table and everything that we are and everything we see is infinite light trapped in kalim. And our vision as human beings, our task as human beings in the world is twofold. First of all, to identify and to release the sparks of life which are trapped within us and within all of creation, within other people, and to find ways of bringing those out into the world. But second, to make ourselves, and I would say our families and our institutions and maybe also our companies, into vessels which can receive and are fit to receive that divine light as best as possible. Starting with ourselves, but Arnold actually had a view of how a company could and should be a vessel for receiving the divine light of creation. So that's how solar works. If you think about it, not very hard, right? You have this inflow of divine energy, and the job of the technologists of solar energy is to create kalim, vessels of silver, of silicone and glass and metal, which are able to receive just a tiny little bit, just a small amount of that almost infinite energy which is coming into the world. Now, as he also often liked to say, a small piece of earth in Arizona, 200 miles by 200 miles, could provide all of the energy which is necessary to power everything which goes on planet Earth. So that's the awareness that solar can bring. Now, for Arnold, as he developed this line of thinking, the unawareness of our interconnectedness to creation comes with a number of negative consequences. And I think that part of the power of his perspective is that other people have noticed some of these consequences, but they haven't joined up the dots, so to speak. People have noticed that there's a number of problems about fossil fuels. Right? They tend to be polluting. They cause climate change. They're finite, and one day they're going to run out. Okay? That day has been pushed back by fracking and shale gas and oil and other ways of extracting the last possible resources of fossil fuels that we can, which are environmentally destructive in themselves. But it is finite. Whatever we do, it is going to run out. They also have an inconvenient tendency to be located under the land of people who don't like us very much, which is, seems to be an unfortunate coincidence. But if you think about it, and when Arnold conceptualizes it, it's not just a coincidence, right? Why not? Because if you have large amounts of oil or natural gas under your land, all you need to do to get rich, right, is to establish exclusive control and ownership over those resources, and then bring in some people from one Western country to drill a hole in the ground to haul up the stuff, right? To have a small infrastructure to process and refine and distribute and ship out the stuff, and they have huge amounts of cash shipping into your country in exchange. No need to educate your people, no need to empower them, no need to give them democratic rights, no need to encourage their creativity, no need to empower women, no need to do anything, right? Except make sure that you have absolutely secure ownership and control over those pieces of land where the good stuff is, and that nobody else can get to touch it. And so it's no coincidence, in fact, that out of the 25 or so countries which get to derive a majority of their export earnings from oil and natural gas, not one of them can be considered a proper functioning democracy. It's not a coincidence, because that's what happens over time to countries that are blessed or cursed in that way. So the way Arnold conceived of it, right, these unfortunate properties of fossil fuels are not coincidence, but they come together because we're deriving our energy from, as he put it, from fossil rather than from flow, right? Because it's the same stuff. Ultimately, it's sunlight, but the question is whether you're using incident sunlight as it hits the earth, or whether you're using 1 billion-year-old fossilized sunlight, which has become buried under the earth, and you're going through all these means of extracting it. And if you are connected to and aware of and using this in infinite flow, then that process is once the technology becomes widely available, as it currently is with solar, it becomes inherently egalitarian, inherently democratic, because there is no one person, organization, or state which can in any way monopolize that technology. It becomes open to anybody to set up a field, to set it up on their roof or in their backyard, and absorb that energy in a way which becomes essentially free. It's inexhaustible, and it's clean. And so those features of fossil fuels and their reverse in terms of in terms of renewable fuels are not coincidental, but they're a cluster of features which depends on whether you're receiving that energy as fossil or fuel or flow. And the choice is, do you continue to empower those thugs and dictators who happen to be sitting on top of this energy? Do you continue to wreck the biosphere? Do you continue to foster huge inequalities of wealth and power in those countries where the fossil fuels are and beyond, because of the power of the companies which extract and mine and sell and distribute that energy? Or do you go for energy which is free, essentially, which is democratic, which is clean, and which, because it depends on technology to develop, fosters education and empowerment and the rights of citizens. So the way Arnold conceived it, our awareness of our interconnectedness with this source of energy comes with all these different consequences and ramifications, socially, economically, and geopolitically. So I think I'll stop more or less there. I just want to say in conclusion, I don't really know what to do with all of this. I'm one of perhaps a dozen people who had some conversations with Arnold where he developed all this kind of way of thinking. He wrote these 2 books, as I said, which are pretty difficult and opaque and hard to understand. And yet, buried in these conversations and in these books are, I think, insights which are tremendously important and tremendously and profound and compelling. As Joseph wrote in his fine and very powerful and important article in the Jerusalem Post, we Jewish people tend to talk a good game in terms of environment, but in practice we just about all suck, and unfortunately is very true.
Is that a direct quote?
That was a direct quote, yes.
I can't believe you used that word.
And on the one hand, the paradox of Arnold's life and work was that he saw his main life work as being this stuff. He really did. He devoted inordinate numbers of hours and years elaborating these ideas, and he saw business and technology primarily, I think it's true to say, as a way of it to empirically prove and verify or disprove the value and the truth of the ideas that he was developing. So, if you developed a body of thinking like this and then tried to express it in a business, right, where you actually have to justify every small thing that you're doing in terms of the ultimate value of dollars and cents. Not that that's the only expression of value, but it is an expression of value, right? If you produce a business which stays in business, then that shows that you're actually doing something of value to people, which people want and are willing to pay for, right? Then that was ultimately the way he saw verifying his body of extremely abstract thought. That's really what he thought he was doing by being in business and creating these companies, remarkably enough. And so, the paradox of his life and work is that he saw this as the main thing that he was doing. This never got to see the light of day in any kind of systematic or publishable form. And yet, the fruits, pardon the pun on Tu B'Shvat, the fruits of this work are the many solar fields which Luz and then Brightsource founded. But I think more than that, actually, the sense that people had at the beginning of the era of concern about climate change, that renewables were something that you could do, which you actually move from fossil to renewables was actually possible, owed, I think, a lot, and perhaps more than anybody else, to Arnold's example in Luz and Brightsource. Because when people actually started talking about a renewables revolution in 2004 and 2006, and Al Gore and the inconvenient truth, the only proof of concept that this could actually be done were these 9 fields, big solar fields, still functioning in California 20 years after they were built, generating 350 megawatts of solar energy.
30 years.
Well, I'm thinking from mid 80s to 2004. But now it's more than 30 years.
It's still working.
So, I think the real world impact of that was tremendous, because it actually showed that it was real. It could be done, that there was actually a living proof of concept that this was something which was possible. So I don't know what will be, the fate of Arnold's writings, and whether they will ever find a way into the world. Certainly his life's work has found practical expressions of tremendous significance, and who knows, maybe here and there are aspects of his writing and his thinking which should and can find wider expression in the way we as Jews talk about renewables and their urgent importance. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to hear any comments and questions. Questions, comments?
I remember Arnold sharing with me, probably was several conversations in the late 80s, about his concept of solar energy was based on making something out of nothing. And it relates to what you're talking about the connecting with that infinite flow that comes out of the Ein Sof. And at the same time, he was not particularly concerned with the environment as such. His concerns, as you said, were much on a much larger plane. When we were writing the business plan together for Brightsource, for Luz 2, he didn't want to put in really any mention of redressing environmental harm that had been done. He was all for doing things very practically and in a business-like manner. So he lived in both of those worlds, and very comfortably.
Interesting point. I'd say that this whole perspective of recognizing our interconnectedness with creation, and living and developing technology which is in harmony with nature creation, is a kind of environmental perspective. He didn't like environmentalists because he thought they were anti-technology, which many of them are, and he thought that was like stupid, and that we're not going to solve any of our problems, including the environmental ones, except through harnessing technology in an ethical way. He did actually. Michael Kagan, who also, as you know, worked on the beginning of Luz 2 with Arnold, hosted a screening of the Inconvenient Truth in his home in 2006, and invited Arnold to come along. And Michael said that Arnold came very skeptical about this climate change thing, and left pretty much convinced that it was real. And he did talk about it as part of the benefits of solar in his later years, but it wasn't really central to the way he talked about renewables. I mean, the way I look at it, and this isn't him now, is that climate change is essentially a phenomenon of interconnectedness. It's because everything in our world, in our atmosphere, is interconnected. The kind of car I drive, or the kind of fuel I burn here in Jerusalem, can actually affect the lives of people in the Philippines who are ravaged by a hurricane, or people in the Southwest United States who are hit by a drought, and that everything. It's a dramatic demonstration of the absolute interconnectedness of all of us, or everything that happens on Earth. And so, it's and you can look at the things we need to do to combat climate change as about restoring our sense of interconnectedness to everything. That is, as Arnold shows here, that the transfer to renewable energy is a vital, central part of combating climate change. It's about restoring our sense of interconnectedness with our sources of energy. You could say that doing something about the meat we eat, and I think most people would probably agree that we can only eat meat and the amounts of meat that we eat given the way that meat is produced today, by cutting ourselves off from any sense of connectedness to the way that meat reaches our
all food.
All food certainly, but particularly meat.
Sure.
And that addressing what we need to do there is about restoring our sense of connectedness to the plants and animals which provide our food. So and so on. You could say the same about transportation. So yeah, I agree. It wasn't a central concern for him, but that's what I just said is how I sort of connect his view about the ethical values of renewable energy to what we have to do about climate change.
I wanted to show you guys this picture. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. This is the Ivanpah solar field in California.
Should see it from an airplane.
Sure.
Phew.
Well, this is one that Arnold Goldman built. This is the largest solar field in the world until 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously I agree with everything you said and everything that Arnold said. Otherwise I wouldn't be working in this field. But the thing that I would like to maybe push back a little bit is on the religious perspective. I think that you could share those ideas of wanting to feel of using our energy sources from the sun gives us a sense of being connected, right? If you look at the happiness index in certain countries that are connected to the land and actually know the places that their food and their livelihoods come from, like if anybody's ever traveled in Africa, you see how happy farmers are. So you know that there is a sense of happiness that comes from being connected to your environment. And when people are cut off from their environment, that's when people will get depressed. So I totally believe in that. But I mean, okay, Bereshit chapter 1:28. Fill the earth and subdue it. So there's these two different perspectives, right? There's the perspective that we're supposed to be stewards of the earth, and then there's the perspective that we're supposed to be masters of the earth, right? And so what fossil fuels is saying all right, we're gonna dig in to the bottoms of the earth and suck out this black liquid, and we're gonna burn it, and it's gonna give us all this energy and hoorah and all this stuff. And I mean, I gotta say, it's kind of like an unspoken thing that whenever you start talking about environmentalism, it sounds really soft. Which is why it's amazing to me that in these works that we're doing, if I'm talking about doing solar street lighting for an entire city, the environment doesn't even get brought up.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you harness that idea? Those are kind of two separate ideas, right? John Wayne was an environmentalist, but okay. So, but how do you harness that idea of being in harmony with the earth from a religious perspective and get people to get behind that?
It's a big question, but I mean, I think you can argue that that some of some important Jewish practices are exactly about that, or about becoming aware of our connectedness with other forms of life. I mean, you can, I think, very compellingly say that kashrut is about actually being conscious and aware of what you're doing when you take an animal's life for food, and and being connected with that animal. Of course, with industrialized kosher meat, that's laughable. But I think that the halachot and the ideas there do promote that sense of interconnectedness. So I think you have to be religious, and you don't have to be Jewish to have that sense. But I think it does flow out of a Jewish way of seeing things, as it did for Arnold Goldman.
So sorry, just one more thing. So I totally believe that the true Jewish argument is to be guardians or stewards of the earth. Like, I believe if you really look at the Torah, that is the true perspective. But you see examples in the world of, for instance, the people that fight against population controls. The people that say, oh, we should just, we can have as many kids as we want. That's always coming from a religious perspective, because it says, be fruitful and multiply. And then the people that say, there's a lot of Christians, for example, that say, oh, climate change can't be real because God would never destroy the earth. Or some stupid argument like, oh, you said you'd never make another flood, so climate change can't be real. That's Christian. So
but let me just say that there's actually religious people from many traditions who hold that view, including our own. Right. Okay, so it's a common view among many religious people that only God can cause climate change, and that God will repair the world if we destroy it.
Good point. So any other questions or thoughts?
Just like saying we could never destroy the world with nuclear weapons. Never allow it.
But he's talking about spirituality and like how God is the infinite source of everything, including the sun. So why is it beyond God to do that? Like if you're taking, I don't understand why you would.
Why is it beyond God to?
Why would God even put these fossil fuels? Why would He even give us the ability to extract fossil fuels if it weren't for a greater plan?
Did Arnold use the word God in the book?
Or why is it?
Well, look, you could say that.
But to categorize fossil fuels as purely evil and terrible just ignores industrial evolution. So I don't think you can come from the perspective that fossil fuels are terrible and awful and have always been that way. I think you can come from the perspective of without fossil fuels, we wouldn't have become this civilization society where we are today. The industrial evolution would never happen. We never have computers or lights or this building or anything. However, now that 200 years has passed and we have technology, that doesn't mean that we need to keep using fossil fuels. The fossil fuels helped us get to this point, and maybe if we're going to talk this from a God perspective, God put it there for our benefit. But too much of a good thing, it's no longer a good thing. At a certain point, you have to realize you don't have to use fossil fuels. In fact, continuing to use them at the rates in which we have, which is unprecedented in human history, creates a situation where a good thing becomes really awful.
Yeah, that's very true. I think fossil fuels were clearly responsible for huge leaps in human economic and social and intellectual development. And nothing that we have would be possible without them. And as you say, at a certain point, we realize we have to move beyond them. And moreover, we didn't know until 20, 30, 40 years ago that they did have these deleterious effects. So now we know, we become responsible for thinking of something better.
I'd also just like to relate to the point that was made about, well, why did God put fossil fuels on the earth? I mean, these were captured 200 million years ago, and there's a tremendous amount of them. Well, I think that
by saying put fossil fuels on the world, you're assuming that you're saying that you put the remnants of the dinosaurs there. Well, the dinosaurs never really existed. That's what you're saying, isn't it? No.
What I'm saying is, you ask a similar question about uranium and plutonium.
Just to be clear, I agree with you that.
Okay, that there's certain materials in the world. Like, did God put uranium on the earth in order for us to make nuclear weapons? Did God put certain chemicals on the earth in order for us to make sarin gas and mustard gas and etc.? And so I think the answer is, well, obviously not. Like, God doesn't want us to make mustard gas and sarin gas, but we have a choice. And that God, it's sort of like going back to the Garden of Eden. Do we take something that we're really not supposed to take? So I'd like to thank Yedidya for beginning this learning session, this series, and for helping to enlighten us about some of Arnold Goldman's very deep teachings on renewable energy. Thank you.
See, with that, what was so great about Arnold was industry from an perspective. He learned all about business, as you know. I mean, he understood financing, he understood all of that, which was remarkable, and the technology side. But his approach was thoroughly and completely ethical.
Yeah.
So, incredible in that sense.
Wow.